Welcome to Future Ready Live, where we talk about topics that will help CPAs, CGMAs, finance and accounting professionals prepare for change and transformation. Today, we're going to be talking about how one becomes a leader in his or her organization and talk to one of my friends and a great leadership expert, Emmanuel Gobillot. So, author of 7 leadership books. I don't know how you do that, by the way, but, including Unleash Your Leader, How to Win in Business. One of my favorites. You can see I've got my signed copy here, Emmanuel, that you sent me still. And one of the other books, I found this on my bookshelf yesterday. The first one, Leader Shift, which is when, and I have in there a note that says, met you on April 8th, 2010.
Wow.
At the Association Digital Now conference in Walt Disney. So anyhow, he's got 2 new books, Crisis Leadership and Fast Collaboration. He consults and speaks on leadership around the globe. And he works with other leaders and to realize there's a better way to lead. That's what I love about what you write about. So with that, Emmanuel, I'll say hello to everyone.
Hi, everyone. So good to be with you. So good to see you and hopefully to be able to see you in person again soon.
Yes, exactly. And so what we were just reminiscing as we were getting kind of in the Zoom room, but what did you say? What, 11 years ago? Almost?
11 years, almost to the day. I think the last time we saw each other was in Pasadena, and I remember it for 2 reasons. One is we had a wonderful meeting and some lovely occasion. And 2, there was a wonderful rose garden near the hotel where we were staying, where Catherine and I spent half a day walking around. So no, it was about 11 years ago to the day. Yep. So it's been far too long, that's for sure.
That is true. That was the AICPA Interchange Conference with all the state CPA societies.
Yeah.
Anyhow, so like I said, I'm a fan of all of your books, but I really want to talk about this Unleash Your Leader because there's some things going on in the finance and accounting leadership level that I think you have some good insights about. So let's start with a quick summary of the Unleash Your Leader book. What's kind of the cliff note of why and what you think is significant about it?
Look, we wrote the book. So Catherine and I wrote the book as a result of a lot of work that we did with senior leaders. And what we found is that, there's a lot of help which is provided to people wanting to become leaders. What seems to be missing is that last step, which is to say, well, how do you become a senior leader? How do you work, in your case, inside the firm at the highest level? What does that look like? Is that just bigger or is it different? So we did a lot of research. And basically in the book, what we're talking about is 3 things. We're saying, look, there's 3 dimensions that are amplified and in some cases different for senior leaders. One we call vertical agility, this idea of moving from the operational to the strategic very quickly and back again. The other one we call boundless perspective, which is how do you get multiple viewpoints on your business? You have to manage multiple stakeholders with multiple demands. How do you get multiple viewpoints? And the last one we call steadfast impact, which is how do you get this ability to remain consistent and yet be able to adapt your message? So these are the 3 things we talk about in the book. We try to make as practical as we could, offering some, tips, techniques, advice, insights to people on their journey to making that progression.
Awesome. That is well done. Now, all right, so the first element that I love gets to the notion of vertical agility. So talk a little bit about that, because I think that's what we're finding a lot of the finance leaders who are been pushed into major transformation efforts, either at the company level or in their finance team. And they're struggling with how do I keep working on the business and help transform it. And I think that's where vertical agility comes in.
So, this idea, it's a bit like, I want to say like getting on a plane. We haven't got on the plane for so long here. I don't know when was the last time you took a plane, but mine was a long time ago. But if you get on the plane, the idea of senior leadership is we have this view that somehow senior leaders fly at 36,000 feet. It's all sunny. It's beautiful. They can see far ahead and the weather is perfect. People at the bottom of the organization, if you think about it as a hierarchy, they're working at 500 feet. You can see the buildings, you can see the detail. It's all great. The rest of us are somehow in the cloud cover, bouncing around, trying to make sense of the world. Now, it's a flawed idea. I mean, nobody has got any idea as to what the future holds. So to think that somehow when you become a senior leader, you can see far ahead and everything is clear is untrue. So the idea for us was to say, look, actually vertical agility is not about, one day thinking big picture, the other day thinking operational. The idea is, how do you combine the two? How do you start to bring the two worlds together? So we always talk about, short term, long term. We talk about all these kinds of tensions, because the world that we inhabit is one of tension as a senior leader. Do you run your business or do you change your business? Now, the truth is, if you think in terms of dilemmas, what my friends von Strompenaar, the culture guru, calls ooh proposition, on the one hand, on the other hand. And if you're always thinking on the one hand, on the other hand, you'll always end up in the middle, in a kind of compromise situation that doesn't satisfy anyone. So for us, vertical agility was about, how do you create and combine the two? How do you reconcile short-term, long-term strategy, operation? And this is where this idea of having a capability mindset, of thinking, how do I make the most of every moment in helping to think about, am I building the right capability for change? Are we delivering what we need to deliver today to enable us to change tomorrow? So it's kind of a mindset rather than being a technique, because actually it's about trying to move away from this polarization or either or, on the one hand, on the other hand, which, as I say, kind of makes life easier, but actually doesn't get you anywhere.
So now the capability, and I want to make sure, understand more about how you're thinking about that, because I think you're hitting on something that is showing up a bunch in our world. So what we're finding, and we're calling it a bit of a role stretch or a talent performance gap, where the senior leaders have been thrust, especially in finance, thrust into the co-pilot of the organization because of the pandemic, right? Forecasting every other day, et cetera. And they're finding that the capability of their teams, and I don't know if this is the same capability, has not been able to keep up. So what advice would you give to those senior, and this gets to that mindset, right? They're telling us that their team does not have a mindset that's open to this fast coming future. What would you say to that?
Okay, so I guess I would put it as 4 questions. There's 4 questions which you need to have in your head at all times. So as a leader, if you're thinking about, I need to change my business, I don't have the capability, we can't deliver, we don't have what it takes, then ask yourself the question, A, what is the capability that I need in order to deliver the outcome that I want? Mm-hmm. And then B, how can I use what I do today to deliver that capability? Now, that's when you're thinking about changing your business. If you're thinking about running your business, I haven't got time to think about the future, we need to deliver now, we've got clients knocking at the door, then you've got 2 other questions. How can we use the task that I'm doing now to change my organization? And how can this task help develop the capabilities I need in the future? Because the truth is, you haven't got a choice. You can't just put one back or do one and then tomorrow I'll do the other. So it's always about thinking about those 2 questions for each side. If I'm thinking about changing, what is it that I'm developing? What is it that I need? Can I do it today? If I'm thinking about running the business, what does that tell me about the capability I need for tomorrow? And it's a trick. It's a mindset. It's a habit. It's not a solution. But it's this idea of constantly thinking about, how do I use 2 sides so I can reconcile them rather than fall in a mediocre middle ground.
Yeah, because the middle is a hard place to be when you're in the middle of a transformation.
Well, it always reminds me, I always use that story, but when Catherine and I got married and we were planning our honeymoon, and for us, it was a question of, where do we want to go? So the first default position is, let's go to New York. Okay, we love New York. Catherine lived in New York. We got engaged in New York. We know it. We know we're going to have a fantastic time. Let's fly out to New York. The other side, you're thinking, but we go there a lot. So how about Japan? We've never been to Japan. Now, you've got this choice. Is it New York or is it Japan? Now, I'm telling you, Tom, most executives end up in Istanbul. Nothing wrong with Istanbul, but they're just going to go there. It doesn't fulfill any of the criteria. It's a beautiful place. I love it. So I don't want our Turkish friends to get upset. But that's kind of where they end up. And you think, actually, there's a much better solution. How do I get the benefits of New York and the benefits of Japan? How do I end up somewhere familiar that I know I'm going to love, but I'm going to do something new and I'm going to get there in a new way? So it's this idea about, how do you combine benefits rather than just saying, okay, well, fine, let's just do the middle.
Love it. I love it. And then the other one that I use quite a bit, especially with our emerging leaders, kind of the Leadership Academy, is your 3 circles.
Yeah.
Right? And I love the way you talk about it as like a telescope or whatever, but in, on, and out of the business. Talk a little bit about that. How does that fit into this, to your leadership model? And talk a little bit about that for our viewers.
So this is a tough one. I mean, actually, this is a real tough one, and it's a tough one today. So you've got 3 things going on. You can work in the business. In the business is immediate, the value is immediate, and it's important. It has to be done. You haven't got a choice.
Right.
So you've got to work in the business, because otherwise you haven't got a business. Then you've got on the business. Now, on the business, the trouble with on the business is it delivers value over time, but it doesn't deliver immediate value. The consequences of not doing it today are actually not that great, but it's a high leverage activity. So it's about your processes, it's about your talent development, it's about capability, all the stuff that you're going to need in order to be in business longer than just today. And then you've got out of the business. Now, out of the business is disruption. It's stuff you haven't thought about, stuff that doesn't kind of seem to be relevant, but might be of interest in the future. Now, what we're talking about in the book is that as a senior leader, or as a leader more generally, but especially as a senior leader, you need to keep the right ratio between those 3 activities. Now, the right ratio, there's not a golden ratio that applies to everybody. It depends the business you're in, the stage of maturity of your business. But there's something about, 30, 50, 20. Even if you're the CEO of anywhere, you're going to have to do stuff. You got to meet with the finance community, your analysts, and so on. So there are things that only you personally can do. Right. So that's in the business. The bulk of your time probably spent on the business, and then some of the time spent outside. So as I said, 30, 50, 20, 40, 50, 10, however you want to split it. But there is a big amount of time spent on the business, which actually we tend to disregard. And this ratio is so important to think about, where am I spending my time? Have I got the right ratio? Am I spending too much time in the business because it's comfortable and I know what I'm doing? Or am I being pushed to spend time on the business? Particularly, I mean, for kind of general managers in the middle of their organization, senior leaders always aspire to leaders that work on and out of the business, but actually push them in all the time. Today, the crisis has pushed us for right reason in the business. Yeah. But I always recall, it was Margaret Thatcher, Lady Thatcher, who in her autobiography writes about Churchill. And she said, the highest dilemma of leadership, if you're Churchill, is you've got to fight the war. Because if you don't win the war, then it's irrelevant. But at the same time, the reason why he never got his party to be elected after the war is because he never thought about the peace. He just didn't have the time. And so, if you spend all your time in the business, what do you do? So you have to do all 3. That's the difficult part of leadership.
Well, and then I know that in the book, I remember you talked about the idea of out of the business, that's where I think you mentioned things like collaboration and maybe even social media to get connected outside your normal network and begin to identify future trends and disruptions that might be coming.
Yeah, and this is where, I mean, I'm hesitant to say this because people will think I'm trying to be overly kind, but this is where associations come in. This is where networks come in. This is where mixing with people come in, because actually, if you don't have those multiple insights, if you don't bring those views in, then you will become irrelevant. I mean, you can work in the business, that's great, you'll deliver today. You can work on your business and you'll be more efficient, more effective. But unless you have a view, and I'm not saying spend all your time out, but you have to have a view. You have to have somebody informing you about what could hit you. I mean, you mentioned social media. When Leadership came out, this is telling you how long publishing used to take. But when Leadership came out, I wrote about this tiny website, which was starting to become popular, called Twitter. And I said, I think this has got some legs. By the time it came out, people were writing to me saying, you're only catching up to Twitter. What do you mean, this little website? Because it took about a year for the book to come out from the time it was written. So you've got to get stuff in.
Interesting. Yeah. And I remember we connected at the Digital Now Association conference on Twitter. And if I remember, we sat down in the stands of the Disney show. We were like right across from each other. It was pretty good serendipity. But that is true about the association world. In fact, we're going to have our first live meeting coming up in July in Las Vegas.
Wow.
And just like you, I'm really looking forward to actually getting out and
I know.
and seeing people. Back to your point. All right, I want to kind of wind it down with your newest book, Fast Collaboration. Right, that is your newest one. You mean you did one on you did another one on the crisis for leadership, which I highly recommend. But so talk to me a little bit about fast collaboration, because you do bundle leadership and collaboration as two really important concepts. So talk a little bit about that.
So about a year ago, just over a year ago, at the onset of the pandemic, Catherine and I realized that actually we are not key workers. We are pretty irrelevant as writers and so on when a crisis comes along. So we thought, well, what can we do? So we wrote Crisis Leadership to kind of push a book out that said, look, this is our thinking about how crises work, what's happened, what's likely to happen, what you might want to do about it. Now, a year on, we were thinking again about this, the Churchill conundrum of okay, so you're in the crisis, but you're going to need to build back. And I know, on both sides of the Atlantic now, we're talking about build back better, build back faster. So how do you tackle this dilemma about having been in a crisis, having worked in, but looking out? And to my mind, there's really only one solution, which is, get some more eyes to look out, get collaboration. Now, the problem with collaboration historically, and we wrote a number of things on collaboration, but actually too much collaboration is probably as bad, if not worse, as not enough collaboration. Yeah. So the issue for us was about understanding what is collaboration in the context of rebuilding, and we use FAST not only to denote the speed, but because it's got AST in it. And these are the three elements we talk about, which is make sure collaboration is appropriate. So in the book, we say, look, this is when you need collaboration. And more importantly, this is when you don't need it. Mm-hmm. How do you make it systematic? So what are the systems you need in place to adopt it quickly? And then finally, what are the tendencies people have? Collaboration is always this difficult prioritization of individual need versus the group need. So how do you manage people's tendencies to go one way or the other? So that's what we talk about. We try to keep it short. We try to keep it really practical, because I know people are busy and have a lot of stuff on their mind. But hopefully it will help to bring people in to just think back about, okay, how do I get my in on out back in sync? How do I get in the right ratio?
Great advice. I love. So I want to thank you. I want to talk about the big takeaways for me is this whole idea, how you framed up that capability conversation, which is huge. The in on out clearly, and even this collaboration, because we're right now working on how do we get more agile, and that involves collaborations like cross-functional teams and those types of things. So this is all spot on. So I want to tell everybody out there, visit EmmanuelGobillot.com. I have to spell this because both names aren't exactly easy. EmmanuelGobillot.com. Emmanuel Gobillot. Follow him on Twitter. That's a little easier. It's eGobillot, EGOBILLOT. So the @ sign in front of that. Go buy the book, Unleash Your Leader Within, if you want to learn that 3-circle concept and how to deal with this capability piece. And always go back to the classic of leadership. That was that still is one of my favorites. And if you looked at all the tags I've got on this, Emmanuel, you'll know that it's being read.
Wow.
Right? It's being used. So anyhow, I can't thank you enough for joining us on this.
No, thank you.
And for my audience out there, thank you for joining us, and don't miss our other future live sessions, #Future Ready Live. And we're on the 1st and 3rd Tuesday of each month at noon Eastern. Thank you.
Thank you, Tom.